later. Okay, there we go. How are you tonight?
I am doing well. It has been a busy day, but I'm doing well.
Good. I am so thankful that you're here. We were just chatting in our book club about the Turtle House, and it just really brings up some great discussion points and makes for a wonderful book club pick. And we're so thrilled that it's out in the world now and that we can share it.
It's been a lot of fun, I have to say. I was a little scared because I've never done this before. I didn't know what it would be like, and it has been received so warmly with so much love, and I've made so many new friends through it. I have to say, it's like if you want to make a whole bunch of friends real fast, publish a book, and
Easy as
yeah,
that. There's
easy as
probably
that.
easier ways to make friends,
Probably
but
maybe making some brownies for people
yeah,
like that would also work.
maybe a little less time consuming. Yeah.
Maybe so, yes.
Yes. Well, I read this book, I think in December before it came out. And so it's been so fun to watch it kind of come into the world and just have like Jenna Bush is holding your book and talking about it. Like, how surreal is that? It's incredible.
It was crazy. And then she kept doing it like over and over again. First there was a photo and then there was a book talk. And then I was like, well, that was cool. That'll never happen again. And the next week they put the book talk on Insta. So it was everywhere there. And then the next week it was on Facebook. And I was like, wow, they're really good at social media. They
She,
really know what they're doing.
Jenna Bush is just the gift that keeps on giving for you. I love that.
Exactly.
Well, this story, there's just so much to learn and to love about it. And really, we were talking about how it asks readers to consider um, their perception of
Okay, to the
home
right, to the left, cha cha cha.
and
Uh-oh.
identity. Um, oops, sorry. Am I, is my,
Nope, it's me. Sorry.
oh, okay, sorry. I wasn't sure.
Hi.
Nope, I can't talk right now. Bye. Sorry.
No,
Yep,
it's
yep.
yeah, I know that.
All the all the kids. Yep. Um, But well, what I loved about the story is just the themes of identity and home and the way that you explored all of these things so well. And just the relationship, the intergenerational relationship, it just really spoke to so many readers. And um, I'm so thrilled to be chatting with you. So, one of the things that we were wanting to know is specifically about your book tour. How has it been with the book being out in the world now? And just what has that experience been like for you, especially as a debut author?
It's, I did not know what to expect, but it's been very busy. And I've raised kids. I've been at home for I mean, I left my full-time job when I was pregnant with my daughter. So 14 years of working from home. And hi there. I haven't done as much traveling. I haven't done as much out in the world. I have done a lot of stuff inside my house. And suddenly I'm out traveling and going to different places and meeting people and missing my kids a lot, but at the same time having a lot of fun and kind of tapping into, I guess, more the person and the personality I was before I was a mom that I've kind of forgotten about, which I think is fascinating. Um, so yeah, it's been great. I've really loved it.
Well, I know that you have your role as a mom and as a designer as well.
Mhm.
So it seems like you've been kind of juggling a lot of different things.
Yeah, and not juggling it necessarily well all the time. I don't think there is everyone's like, how do you balance everything? It's like, oh, I don't balance. It's not
Mhm.
a balance. I'm like, if I this my life was a balance meme, I would be on the ground all the time because just some things take precedence than over other things, then you have to switch and do something else. And I've had to cancel a book tour stop because my daughter's band changed the date of their spring concert. And I was like, I can't miss her last spring concert of middle school. So I've done that kind of stuff. And everyone has been so graceful and kind about those kinds of changes, which I'm really appreciative. Yeah, I've been all over and it's been fun.
Has there been anything surprising since you've been out on tour?
I don't know if surprising, but I have had a lot of readers come up to me with their phones with pictures of their own grandmothers, which I thought was, I didn't see that one coming. And I would look down the line and there would be a lot of people, mainly women, going through their phones really quick. And I was like, oh, they're texting somebody or whatever. But no, they were looking for their favorite picture of their own grandmother. And
Mm.
I've seen a lot of grandmothers. I've had a lot of grandmothers show up in my email box and in my DMs because just people just want to share their loves with me. And I think that's been kind of fun. I like it. Feels like I get to have a close connection just immediately with people, which I really enjoy. So
Oh, that is so special that you've just touched people in that way, in a way that resonates deeply with them and they're inclined to share. And I saw on your website that you have photos from your own family. And I shared
mhm.
that in our chat group earlier. And those were so fun to look through.
They're so funny. The idea came up in like a meeting there. My editor was like, do you have any pictures? You know, every once in a while I'll post on Instagram like a real throwback of like my dad when he was a teenager or something, just because every once in a while I'll find one and I think they're so cute. My dad was adorable. My mom was pretty adorable too. And I'm crazy about them. They live a quarter mile that way. So I see them a lot. And they're like, "Would you post some of those photos? Do you have any?" And I was like, "Do I have photos?" We are a very picture taking family. And I sent the all call out to my cousins and my aunts, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've got photos of grandmother." And so they were just be coming over to my house in shoe boxes. And then they were like, "Amanda, hey, would you mind scanning these too?" And so I was I spent days scanning old photos from the family. And then I had like probably 300 to choose from, and that's what I had stuck on that one web
Mhm.
page. So it was fun, but a lot of
Oh,
scanning. I
yeah.
mean, luckily I know what I'm doing, but still, that's a lot of it's a lot of
I was
computer
gonna say
time.
that is such a labor of love for your whole family, and like what a gift to them too.
Yes, and now we have them in one place, and that's very lovely to have because some of them
Mm.
were pretty beat up. There's one photo that's my favorite of my grandmother. She's probably about 14 years old, but it is like ripped. So I went through and kind of pieced it back together and repainted stuff in. Thank you, Photoshop skills.
Yeah,
So I could have a more complete image. But still, I love looking at them, and I love not only looking at the faces of the people, but in the backgrounds, what they're standing in front of. I am just that's the great thing about having such a huge, being a graphic designer, having such a huge screen. I can
yeah,
zoom in and look what are they eating? What kind of bowls they have? What's on that fridge? Like, I don't know. It's like I'm a
yeah.
voyeur in my own family's life.
That's so amazing and something that will stick with you and again serve your family really throughout the years. So that's so wonderful. How did you kind of switch gears from being a graphic designer and what was your path to publication with this book?
You know, I've never, I really wish, I mean, I have not switched gears. I still design.
Oh,
I have a project due tomorrow for Girl Scouts of Texas, Oklahoma Plains.
uh,
Um, so no, it's been one of those things that I've always written, and it was kind of like a reward to myself. That was how I saw it. It was like, okay, if you get all your projects done and do all the kids, you got to take care of the laundry, clean out that room, and then you can go write on Friday.
mm,
And I would take my daughter to preschool, and I would have a babysitter, some of the best babysitters in the world, because they were young college girls, and they told me when my hair was cute and like they
mm,
liked my shoes. And so I will love them forever now. And they'd come take care of little Jack, who was a baby at the time. And I would go write in a coffee shop for a few hours and then
mm,
bring home lunch for the babysitter and Jack. And I did that every Friday religiously. And then I'd wake up early and write as well. So I was getting a little time in the morning and then my special Fridays. And then every summer, um, I'd start applying for like all these different writing conferences in the spring. And it's kind of a pain. You have to write essays and get your work pulled in together and pay a fee. But if you get to go, you get to go and you get to be with famous writers and editors and agents. And it's a lot of other writers that are also struggling to figure out who they are. And my kids called it writers camp. And I
mm.
would go every summer for a week to writers camp. And I would choose a different writers camp because I wanted to get to know different writers and readers and just agents in different parts of the country. So that was my other little activity. That was just did it. And I kind of thought, well, if the best thing that comes out of this is I've made a ton of friends and I've gotten to see some stuff, then that's fabulous. That's more than a lot of people.
Mhm.
And but I met agents that way, and those agents were on the list for when I sent out my manuscript. And that was one of the agents. I mean, I had a lot of meetings because of it, and I got to choose my agent because of that experience. And then it just kind of paved the road for being able to promote the book. I have a lot of friends in the industry just because I managed to get out there.
Yeah.
And getting out there with little kids and a job it was hard, but it was just
Yeah.
something that was so important to me. So
I love that you carved out your special Fridays. I'm like, I gotta get a special Friday. Like that
I
sounds amazing.
protected it. I protected it, and Lord help the kid who got sick on the Friday because it happened.
Mm,
You
hmm.
know, I mean, like Thursday night, someone starts throwing up, and you're like, oh. And that was like a big growing experience for me because I am type A. I don't know does anyone do Enneagram stuff?
Yeah.
Anyone know?
Uh-huh.
I'm an Enneagram 3, so
Oh,
total
me too.
goal
I'm like,
oriented.
yes, yes.
I'm a Leo, so I am like the world's like I'm sure I'm just annoying. I'm a point monger. I mean, like I'm calling my editor all the time, going, "How many books do we sell?" And she was like, "Please stop." But I can't help it.
Yep.
And so yeah, it was just something that I don't know. So I could go on forever.
No, no, that's so great. I love to hear just your book's journey and how it arrived into our hands. So thanks for sharing that. I want to ask, I think the question that we are most curious about as our book club, but we know the story is based on your family history
Mhm.
from your beloved grandmother. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that piece of things, how that came to be, and what aspects of the story you really stayed true to with her.
Yeah, I've had that question a lot, and the way I've kind of like answered it is the saddest parts are the ones that are the most true, unfortunately. The
Mm,
happiest parts were the ones that I had to insert in order to keep the story going. And also to keep it from being too sad. My grandmother's life was very challenging. So back in 2009, well, I'd say actually 2006, she was developed stomach cancer. It was pretty severe. Um, she was given the option of chemo and radiation with hopes that it would shrink it enough and help, help her have a somewhat longer life, maybe help her if you have a few years, or she could have totally had her stomach removed because it was contained within the stomach. And she chose the surgery, which is very difficult. A lot of people don't survive it very long. It is, I mean, it's a hard one, but that's what she wanted because she was that person. And she slowed down quite a bit after that because she was not as healthy as she was. She did lose a lot of weight, and she had to eat constantly, like little meals to keep strong and keep her digestion going. So, in 2009, she had had kind of a rough little bout and was not getting out as much, and my dad was worried about her. And I was pregnant with my first child. So Megan is 14 now, so this is 14 years ago. And my dad said, "Hey, would you go over to your grandmother's house and just kind of get her stories? Just ask her questions, see if you can get any of her stories from when she was growing up, because she doesn't like to talk about that kind of stuff, and I think she would do it for you." And I had left my job, my full-time job as a graphic designer and an art director, and I was finishing up my master's degree thesis and trying to get things like squared away before baby came. And I was like, "Daddy, oh my gosh." And so at first I was like, "Oh, that's going to be a lot." But I did it because my daddy asked me. And if my daddy asked me to do something, I do it because I'm daddy's girl. And so I went over there with this little book that I got from Barnes and Noble, and it was called Questions for Your Grandmother. It was like for a kid to ask grandmother questions. And I sat down with her, and the first question was like, "Tell me about your birth." And my grandmother just like started just cackling like it was the funniest thing ever. And she's like, "Oh, I got real good story for you now," and told me about how she was uh, like conceived in very unlucky years of her two parents, that she had like unlucky birth numbers. And when that would occur in her village, the babies were thrown away, which back a long time ago, and I don't know how true it is, they were thrown off a mountain. But we don't know. I don't know if that's actual. That's what folklore says. But in her family, in order to trick the bad luck, because it was both mother's bad luck year and father's bad luck year, the decision was to give my grandmother away to a family who lived up the mountain a little bit that had no children. and they would go through the very first rites within the Buddhist religion. So first rice, first like the naming ceremony, and she'd get through all that, and it would trick the bad luck. So my that's what they did. So my grandmother was given away to this other couple, but what no one anticipated was that this other couple would fall in love with this brand new little baby girl they were given because they had never been able to conceive. And suddenly, this cute little thing was thrust to them, and they didn't want to give her back. And so there was like a back and forth, like, can we just keep her? I mean, you can have more. She finally they convinced her to be given back to my great grandparents. And I was like, my grandmother told me the story, and I was like, okay, that's a lot. Like, that was a lot more than I anticipated. I mean, telling you a story about your birth, I thought she'd be like, well, it was very rainy. I don't know,
Yeah.
something innocuous. Not that she had been given away to a childless couple. Um, and so that's kind of how those stories started, is I would ask her a question, and sometimes the very typical answers, and sometimes they were answers that I was like, what? And I'd have to go home and do the research. Like, is this real? Is this a real thing? And yes, it was. So that's kind of how I gathered the stories. And then in 2014, she, became very weak, and she finally passed away. I got to see her the morning before she passed, and then by that evening she was gone. And yeah, that after that, I was just lonely for her. I missed her. We had become very close in a short amount of time. She had been moved to an assisted living, like it's just like 2 miles down the road from me. And so I would drop Megan off at the preschool, and my son, and I was pregnant at the time with Jack. So my big old pregnant body would go over to the assisted living, and they'd feed me breakfast over there, and hang out with my grandmother and some of
Mm.
the other ladies there. And it was a blast. I mean, talk about, want to be queen bee for a few minutes, be the pregnant lady in an assisted living. Um, it was a lot of fun. And I just loved being around her. And when
Mm.
she was gone, it just felt like there was a huge hole in my heart suddenly. So I started writing down her stories, just kind of longhand, early in the mornings, trying to get some sense of her life. And I was doing it like in third person, like one would write a novel, but it was more of just trying to keep her with me. But I
Mm.
realized very quickly that I had there was connective tissue that I was missing. Like, well, what did she do then? Or when did that happen? And so I would just make stuff up. And that was the fiction came in. I was like, okay, well, it makes sense that she would do this next. And so that's how it became a novel. So yeah, some of the sadder stuff is the true stuff. There was not a turtle house, unfortunately. That is something of my own making. I think it's something that I always wanted for her. Something that was as beautiful and as like that's something, a place that she could live in that matched her insides, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Mhm.
And so that was just something that I really wanted for the character and for my grandmother also.
Mm. I love that you just wrote her a happy ending, like the one that you wish she would have had.
I wrote her a happy ending. Yeah, it was
Mhm.
not an easy life, and she missed her home her entire life here, and but
Mhm.
also managed to make a life here. So to miss something and still continue on, it's like holding two separate things in hands, and just to keep walking. So I think I
Mm.
learned a lot from her about how to um like handle trauma and still keep moving forward. And there's something about that ability I know is coming from her.
Mm. I love that.
So
I wanted to touch on one of the things that you mentioned, writing in third person. Sarah, do you want to ask your question that we were chatting about in book club if you're free, or do you want me to? I can chat about it too, but I feel like this is a perfect segue to your question.
Yeah, I just wondered why you chose to write Leah in the first person and then the grandmother in more of a third person.
well, I think what I wanted to do there is there's a Japanese style of writing that is it's very first person kind of fluid thought process. And so I was trying to replicate something like that. But then also I did not feel like I could write my grandmother as first person, out of respect for her, and out of respect for her culture, and the fact that I don't know, I don't speak Japanese, and since I was not raised in Japan, I felt like I was just too many steps off to be first person. But I felt like Leah needed to have like a way to talk to the reader very intimately, to tell her story, and to also translate her grandmother's story for readers as well, because they would be seeing it from third person grandmother's perspective, historical, but then to understand aspects of her life as she was growing older in Texas. I felt like there needed to be like almost like a translation partner there. So first person seemed to fit really well.
Yeah, I think that worked so well. And I didn't notice that you had done that until Sarah brought it up. And I'm like, you're right. And I think that's a good thing because I think that it read really seamlessly and you just felt kind of in tune with the characters. At least that was my intention. But then when Sarah pointed that out, I'm like, you're right. That's an interesting, like, structural choice that you made that worked really well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the historical is definitely third person past, and then the first person is even more present tense. So you're moving along with the story as it happens in real
Hmm.
time. But yeah, I love interesting structural concepts with books. It kind of gives my brain one more thing to chew on when I'm reading.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time not writing things in a complicated manner. And I'm doing it again with this next book. I'm like, huh, a smarter person wouldn't make it this challenging. But I just kind of make things hard on myself. I don't know.
Well, I'd love to hear more about Leah and her character and if there was anything that inspired her or if how she was as far as was she easier or harder to write than the character that was based on your grandmother? How did that play out for you?
Well, Leo was a lot harder for me to write. The grandmother portions came very quickly and very fluidly. I mean, it took a while to write them all out, but a lot of the words were not revised or changed. So some of the stuff that came out of my pen on those early mornings at like 4:45 in, 2015 are the same words that ended up in the book.
Mm.
Leah was written, she started a couple years into the process and then was kind of braided into it as revisions started to happen. Leah was hard for me because I think Leah's kind of a combination of me, my sister, my cousins, my best friend who's Chinese American. There's just like a type of personality that I was trying to, I don't capture in Leah. And so because of that, I think it was a little harder. And also just some of the stuff that Leah went through. I had had similar experiences. I had a friend who had a very similar experience with a professor, and that was challenging to write because I was actually processing stuff that had happened to me as I was writing Leah. And you would think that by the time that I was writing something, I was so much older and I would have processed it by then. No, probably not. Apparently not. I was too busy doing other things, and I like to process things as I write. So I think that was Leah's challenge was trying to tell her story that would be interesting, and also it was no way it was never going to be as interesting of a story as her grandmother's story. And I knew it as I was writing it that I was like, there's no topping Grand story. She was the biggest character in the book. She was the biggest person in the room. My grandmother was. That was just how life was. And I kind of came to the realization that it doesn't need to be because they need to help each other, that everyone brings something to the table in life and in this book. And so I think Grant Minnie's big story and Leah's smaller story, they kind of hold hands and help each other through the novel. So yeah, Leah has a part of my heart because she is that 90s girl, which I was. I was a 90s college student. And I would turn on all my old 90s music and listen to it for a few minutes before I started writing Leah because I had to get back into the frame of mind. Um, I went to Texas A&M, which is in College Station, Texas. Leah went to school at the University of Texas, which is down the highway. For anyone who knows anything about Texas football, the two schools hate each other, but that's okay because I loved Austin. And so when I was in College Station at Texas A&M, I would go with my sorority sisters and we'd hit the road and go to Austin and hang out all the time. So all those places that are in Austin in Leah's past are places that I hung out at in the 90s, which was a lot of fun going through all those memories too.
Yeah. What was your 90s like go-to Get Your Mind Right song
Oh
for writing Leah.
gosh. Oh, Leah listened to well, what was it? The like Fast Car, like the original
Oh,
version.
Tracy
Tracy
Chapman.
Chapman, the original Tracy Chapman CD.
Yep.
I listened to it on repeat my freshman year of college. Like, you
Mhm.
got a fast car. I mean,
Yep.
like I loved it. And a lot of like, you know, Pearl Jam. There's a lot of alternative rock.
Yeah.
And then when y'all got to Texas A&M, it was all old country because that's what they listened to in College Station. So there was a lot of Oak Ridge Boys and a lot of you know, who's it? Don Williams, the gentle giant of country music. So like a lot of like old 70s country and a whole bunch
Mhm.
of 90s alternative.
Okay, good. A good mix. A
Two
good
things,
mix for
two
writing.
things
Yeah.
that don't go together, but somehow they do. Yeah.
Yes. Well, you've mentioned a little bit about it sounds like you wrote your grandmother's piece first, and then you said you braided
Mhm.
Leah's story in. How did that work? Did you know the ending of the story before you started? Did you kind of go with it as you were writing? And were there major changes that took place? Because it sounds like this took you a while to write,
It
correct? Like
did.
years? Yeah.
It took years. The historical part took a long time because I was doing it, you know, just between kids and on Fridays and between diaper changes. Like it really was like handwritten. Then I'd write out pages, then I would type it and change it, you know, do my revisions then and then start over again. So that took a while. I really got a ton of stuff done in 2018 and 2019 because I knew that my son was about to go to kindergarten. And I knew once he went to kindergarten in the fall of 2019, my life would change because I would have time. And I'd seen it with my daughter going off and seeing how much that opened up my days because I was very much, I mean, I worked from home. I watched kids. My daughter is actually on the spectrum, so I had OT appointments and PT appointments and ABA therapy, and I had all the things going on. So when Jack was going off to kinder, I was like, okay, this is my chance. If I'm going to be a writer for reals, this is it. I'm gonna put 100% into this and see how far I can get. And it's just I kept on hitting goals that first his kindergarten year. Well, of course, by the time of the spring of his kindergarten year, a pandemic had happened. So a lot of the goals just kind of stopped. And I was like, oh, bummer. But it was a blessing in disguise in some ways because everyone was at home. So all of New York Publishing Society was at home and all of LA was at home and they were all on Zoom. And it let a girl from Texas in a small town hop into the same Zoom rooms as some of these
Mm.
people. And I got to meet even more publishing people through that experience because everyone was desperate. It was kind of like the Wild West of Zoom. Like there were no rules. You know, publishers were hanging out with, you know, editorial assistants, were hanging out with writers from Texas. Like we were just all kind of there together. And it was kind of cool. So I
Mm.
was like, okay, I'll just do every single Zoom event that has to do with a book, and I'll meet people and I'll stay sane and it'll be okay. I will
Mm.
homeschool these children. And in my in between times, I will talk to complete strangers on Zoom. And it worked. So,
Oh, I
yeah.
love that so much for you. Well, I resonate with what you're saying. One of my boys is on the spectrum as well, and I just feel like I'm constantly running to all the appointments. It's encouraging to me because I nobody has gone to full day kindergarten yet, and I'm like, when this happens, it will
Friend,
be a day. It will be a day. So it's nice to
it's a
hear you
day.
say that.
It's a day with tears, but then also you think that time is going to be like slow. No, it goes by in a wink. It's
Mhm.
like that
Yeah,
that day is at the fastest like 6 hours of your life because it's over
yeah.
with. But I just I don't know. It was a labor of love all those years, and it kept me afloat when times were hard and when things were disappointing and life could be disappointing. It was the book that kind of kept me um, on like life raft. So
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And Sarah in the chat, she wrote, even though it was third person, back to that discussion, I felt like I still knew Mineko and cherished her story. I love that you honored your grandmother with this novel, and I could feel how much you loved her through your writing. Yeah.
I did I loved her very much. I was a little obsessed with her.
Mhm.
And I think that comes from I had the two grandmothers. I had my mom's mom that was just the cookie baking, let's go shopping for you, baby. You're the cutest thing ever. I love you so much. All the time, grandmother. And then I had my other grandmother that kind of standoffish, wasn't as touchy feely. There was not a lot of hugs and kisses. it was a different, culturally, she was a different kind of grandmother, and just personally, she was a different kind of woman. And because of that, I think it was like the boyfriend that you always want the attention from, but they keep it away from you, so you're just like, oh, more obsessed. That was my grandmother and me. Like she'd be like, Mandy, go away, and I'd be like, no, tell me more about you. Because she was a spitfire, and she said what she wanted to say, and kind of looked at life in a very different way with a lot of freedom in the way she thought about things. So
Mhm. Yeah, she was playing hard to get.
always playing hard to get with me. And then finally I got her, and it was, yeah. And then we became super close. And then, yeah.
That's
Yes.
wonderful. Mom, do you have a question? You want to comment?
I
Okay.
do. I do. Um, I had seen an interview that you had done, and you talked about how when your grandmother, was, knowing she was going to pass, she had some wishes for her cremation and a special photo. And I just
Yes.
wonder if you'd share more about that.
I will. I'll be happy to. So when she was in the assisted living, she was put on hospice care a few times and miraculously would pop back out of it. And you know, the nurses be like, oh, she's going to pass within the next few days. And then the next few days later, she was sitting back up in her bed, wondering why she didn't have a cigarette. And so that happened a few times. And then finally, we almost didn't believe them when they said that she was going to die. Like it was kind of like, ha ha, you don't, this one's not going to. But she, it looked like she really was not going to get better. My dad and my aunt went over to talk to her about how she wanted things done. They kind of knew that she wanted to be cremated, but they wanted to make sure that everything was done correctly. She had different rules about how she wanted the bed faced when she passed away, very specific rules that were more Shinto Buddhist, in the way she thought about things, like facing the sun and all kinds of things that they tried to do for her in a very small assisted living room. Um, but one thing she told them was that, oh yeah, I want to be cremated with this certain photo. So it's in my underwear drawer. Don't look at it now. Just later, just go through there to the bottom, pick it, it's envelope, just take it out and just put it on my chest and then just cremate me. And that's exactly how she's like, you know, push me in. It's fine. I'm like, oh my gosh. So she did. I went to go see her the morning that she passed away and said goodbye. And then later on that evening, I got a call from my dad that she was gone. And I had just fed Jack and put him into bed. My baby was probably, oh gosh, 6 weeks old.
Mm.
And so he was little bitty. And dad was like, don't come up, baby. Just stay there. She'd want you to stay there with the kids, and I'll just talk to you tomorrow. And he hangs up the phone, and I'm like about to cry. And then my phone rings immediately, and it's my mom and my Uncle Bill. And so, if you can picture this, Aunt June and my dad are the two most devoted siblings. Of the four kids, there's always kids that are like always there. Well, that's my mom and or my dad and Aunt June. They're in the room with their mother. Then Uncle Bill and my mom, the outlaws in the family. So the sister-in-law and brother-in-law are out in the hallway. And my mom's like, you will not believe what we just found. We just opened that drawer, and the picture is of her boyfriend from Japan. And it was shocking because I had known that she had had a boyfriend that she had loved. And I knew that he had died, but she had always kind of been like, yeah, like no big deal. And I looking back now, it was kind of a trauma response during the interview that she would shut down so much. Um, and so that's when I realized that she had loved him all those years. And for all those years, she had carted this photo around in her
Mm.
underwear drawer. And so it was in a little bitty envelope. It's about that big, like a tiny little portrait. It looks like he had been conscripted, yes, drafted into the war. And they, fitted for a uniform. They took one photo and they shipped him off. And that by that time in the war, there wasn't like a lot of boot camp action. It was pretty much get on your uniform, you're going to go fight. And he did not actually live very long once he reached Manchuria. He was not cut out for war. And my grandmother knew that she would lose him, I think, when he left, because she
Mm.
had told me that he was sweet and that he was kind of geeky, is what she said to
Mm.
me, and that that she was like, oh, he liked me bossing him around. He didn't mind it. And so I was like, okay, so he must have been just like a nice dude, just like a nice young man who loved her. And just seeing that. So my mom took a photo, and my mom and technology, I wish what I had done. I wanted to get in the car immediately and drive there and take the photo and take it over to Walgreens and have it like photocopied or scanned.
Mhm.
But I was just so tired. I'd been up, Jack wasn't sleeping the night, so I was just tired. And I was like, Mama, take a photo of it. She's like, okay, I'll do that. Well, she took a photo, but it's mostly of her thumb. So you see like the outline of his head in the back. It's kind of blurry, but it's a photo. And they did cremate her with the original photo.
Oh,
And
that's so
so
special.
it was. And then, yeah, it was just kind of a strange experience. So after I wrote the book and I wrote this love story, hoping that I was getting part of it right, my Aunt June read it and was like, Mandy, you got it right. How did you know that about the river? And I was like, well, I just kind of made it up. She liked to swim in the river. I figured there was a river in town that, you know, and she said the only time I ever heard my mom cry was she woke up from a nightmare when I had come home from school. And because my grandmother worked nights and would sleep during the day and then get up for the kids. Um, and she had a nightmare, and in the nightmare it was this boyfriend that she had loved so much, and he was on one side of the river and she was on the other side wanting to cross to get to him, and she was saying, he was saying, Mineko, no, or Miyako, no, stay over there, please stay over there, you can't come to me. And she was distraught, and it stuck with my aunt because she was just not an emotional person. And I was like, I didn't know, I just wrote what I felt sounded good at the moment. And so I don't, I think there was something about her being nearby when I was writing it. I don't know if that's true. I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but I would get up in the mornings and walk into where I'd write, and I would smell cigarette smoke, and it would be like,
Mm.
Grandmommy, you here? I mean, like, it was just, she had a certain scent about her person that is very, I guess, like soy sauce and smoke and lipstick all together. And yeah, so
Mm.
I adored her.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. And Mom, thanks for bringing that up. I'm so glad that was such a special part of your story. So thank you for sharing.
No problem.
Does anyone else have questions right now that they wanted to ask?
I have a quick, oh, sorry, Marianne. Do you want me to
No.
go first? Just
Yeah,
barge in.
go ahead.
Amanda, I have a question, something that just has been on my mind. I messaged Kelly about this a couple days ago, but I live in Oregon, so I'm on the West Coast. And I was just curious if you had talked to your grandma at all, or what her experience was moving from Japan to Texas. Because on the West Coast, there I felt I was actually looking up census information because I was trying to think I was being off target, but I wondered if how her experience was different than if she moved somewhere like Seattle or San Francisco, or an area that had a higher Asian population, especially coming as a war bride from Japan. And I just was curious. I just kept thinking as I was reading how it seems like, and maybe I'm wrong, which is why I'm asking, it seems like it'd be more difficult to settle in Texas as a Japanese woman.
Yeah, it was definitely not the best choice. But my grandmother she didn't have the choices. She had married
Right.
my grandfather, and he was a rancher, and he was going home. Um, and because it was a different time period. There were no Japanese Americans, I mean, not a lot of Asian Americans in general, um, in the town. I think probably maybe a couple of families in Dallas, maybe one in Fort Worth, but that was still an hour away in each direction. And she was very isolated. And in fact, years later, I was working on my thesis at University of North Texas, and I was working at interconnected short story collection about internment, Japanese internment camps, one camp in particular called Topaz. And so I had taken like a research trip slash getting away from town with my husband trip, and we went to San Francisco together and stayed in Japantown. My husband we just walked around this very sweet part of San Francisco. Was just the Japanese. That Japanese lived there and had I guess shrunk over the years and was much smaller. But the street signs were in Japanese and the food and the stores. And I took all these photos and I called my dad and I was like, Daddy, you will not believe it. And he was just shocked. He's like, what? There's a place? There's a place that we could have lived that was Japanese? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh my gosh, how different it would have all been. How different for my mom wouldn't have been lonely. And he's like, I don't think I would have been beat up. And I was like, I don't I mean, it was just one of the hardest places I think someone could go after a war. Um, but yeah, choices were not theirs to make.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I was just thinking what, like you just said, how it would have added even more to the challenge of
Yeah.
immigrating with a, white English speaking husband who's a rancher. Like it just,
Yeah, I think, and had my grandmother known about that, she was not happy where she was. And I think at times she did wish she could take those kids and take the 4 kids and leave and go someplace else.
yeah.
But, the odds were stacked against her, being an immigrant. And she took a while getting her citizenship. She was really hesitant to do it because she knew that would be the final, that just cut the final string between her and her homeland. So,
Will you
yeah.
remind me, and I don't know if your grandmother's timeline was the same as the novels, but when did your grandmother move to Texas from Japan?
59. So my dad was born in
Okay.
53. He came to the United States finally when he was 6. They had visited one time before when I think my dad was about 4. They came back for a funeral and my dad doesn't remember it. My grandmother was not incredibly fond of it, Texas, and so they stayed for 2 more years in Tokyo. And my grandmother liked Japan. Um, and what stopped him from staying there, they might have stayed longer, is he developed cancer and he needed to go back home to see family and have the VA take care of him, and his care would have been better in the States. So, yep.
And Mary Ellen, did you have a question too?
Hi, Amanda.
Hi.
I was wondering a couple things about the turtle that's on the roof of the house.
Yes.
And I'm on page 63 in the book. And how do you say the Japanese name for turtle?
Well, the turtle is called a minogame. Is that what you're
Yeah,
minogame?
Mimogani?
Minogame. So it's
Mi-
minogame. It's kind of a mhm.
Minogami. And
And it's oh, go ahead.
was it on all 4 corners or just the one corner?
It was on all 4 corners. The one that she has is the one that was removed. So generally, they would have some of these old country houses. They had the beautiful tile roofs, and they would have kind of like a gargoyle on the corners to scare off evil spirits. And a lot of times, they would look really just menacing. And I found one when I was doing the research on like one of those antique sites that they have. And I was like, oh my gosh. And this one just had kind of like a smile, like, hey, come on in, as opposed to like trying to like scare people away. And that was just the one that stuck with me. I loved it.
Okay, Minogami.
Minogame.
Minogami. Okay.
And then the turtles, I mean, my grandmother was a big turtle fan. She would rescue turtles when she had a chance. We have a lot of it's turtle season out here, and I mean, turtles are crossing the roads and just doing some very reckless maneuvers right now. And but she would always, she saw one, especially like a bigger one, she'd be like, "Oh, that'd be a shame for that one to go because it's lived so long." She'd pull over, and she had yellow dishwashing gloves in the back of her station wagon, and she'd pull those on and go grab the turtle, and wherever his little head was pointing is where she would walk it. So if he was like kind of this way in the street, she'd be like, all right, she'd like draw an imaginary line and walk that way on a farm to market road in Texas, which, I mean, no speed limits. People are just driving their pickup trucks just willy nilly. And yeah, I'm sure I mean, had a few scares, but she did it for the turtles. And to the point that I do the same thing. Like if I see a turtle struggling and it's not on a highway and I'm not going to risk my life too much, I'll go do it because it's just like it's the right thing to do at this point.
We were just I don't know, 2 weeks ago in Cleveland and met a guy who's Chinese, and
Mhm.
he had a turtle thing and a little quote on his wall, and it had it has to do with luck and watching
Mhm.
over you. Is that the same in Japan?
Yes, it's very similar. The Japanese and the Chinese share a lot of the same folk stories. They just kind of change the names and the words. Our Japanese language is a derivative of Chinese, so lots of stuff that they don't like to admit they share, but they share. Um, in Japanese culture, the turtle means good luck. It also means longevity, so like a long life, and that's the reason the Minagami has that weird thing on its back that looks like a wiglet. It looks like a wig stuck on the back of it, but it's supposed to look like seaweed. If you've ever seen a mossy back turtle and the moss kind of hanging off, that's what they were inferring there.
Mm.
So yeah, it's a very stylized thing, and you see it all over, and it's also in a lot of folk tales. So turtles popping up and being tricky, and usually a god in disguise. And if you're
Mm.
kind to the turtle, then you'll get treasure. But if you're mean, you'll like turn into a bug or something. It's not good. Don't be mean to a turtle. They'll get you in the end.
That's super fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and Mary Ellen pointed out on the spine of the book, we found a sneaky turtle.
Yeah, there's a sneaky turtle there. There's a sneaky turtle on the cover of the book above the
Yes.
Japanese writing, and then there's turtles on each intro page to the different books
Yes.
within.
I love it. I do want to talk about the cover a little bit because, oh my goodness, what a stunner.
It's so
What a stunner.
pretty.
And I was listening to an interview that you did with Cindy at Thoughts from a
Uh-huh.
Page, and Cindy was the woman who put me in contact with you, so I'm so grateful to her. But I loved what you were telling her about the drawing of the house in your interview with her. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I'd love to. So I got one version of a book cover. Some writers get 40, some writers get three, some writers get like a number in between. I got one. And I think it's because I'm a graphic designer and they're like, well, this one's going to be hard. And also, they had just gone through a strike, HarperCollins had. So I think
Yep.
they were just working as fast as they could. So I get this one cover and it's really pretty. But the house in the corner just throws me because it's not a drawing, it's a photo, and it's a house that would look more appropriate for like the panhandle of West Texas. So it looks like a dust storm house. Looks like a house that has had a lot of damage to it. The roof is caved in and there's dust kind of climbing up the sides. And I looked at that and was like, seriously? Like I was like offended. I was like, come on, y'all, like Google something. And so I sent a note back saying, yeah, the house wouldn't have been this dilapidated. The farmhouse would have, been structurally sound, older, but structurally sound. So I sent a few photos over of like houses that were in my area over here that I thought might work. And so they sent one back and it was it was an illustrated version this time, but it was like a plantation house. And it was like white columns. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's Terra Plantation. Scarlet O'Hara is going to come running out the front here in a second. And it was really pretty, but it was like, I was like, okay, that's not it either. And I just felt like such a meanie at that point. I was like, oh, how am I ever going to say to these nice people, you got it wrong. Let's figure it out. So I got on the phone with my Aunt June. I was just terrified. I was like near tears. And she's like, oh, honey, you know that every time they tear one of these houses down out here, I go out and sketch it first, and I just keep the sketches because she's an artist and she has always loved the land out in Wise County, Tarrant County, Denton County, just that part of Texas that we're from. And a lot of development has happened over the last 20 years, and so some of these beautiful old ranch houses have been torn down. So she would just took it upon herself to go sketch them real quick. And so she sent over photographs of some of the sketches that she had done, and they were just perfect. And so I vectorized them and kind of mocked up the cover and sent it back to Harper. And they were like, cool. It's like that. I was like, that's it. Cool. We're done. And so they're like, do you think she'll give it to us for free? And I was like, yeah. And so they gave her photo or art credit and we just moved on from there. So it's my family's art on the cover of the book about the same family. And then my cousin makes cakes. So my Aunt June is the artist, and her daughter is a baker, and she made all the cakes and cupcakes for my book launch party here in my
Oh,
hometown. So it was just like we went full circle. We did all the things. We just kept it
That's
in
what I
the
was gonna,
fam.
yeah, I was gonna say full circle moment. And so, yeah,
Uh-huh.
I always thought the cover was just so, so beautiful. But then when I heard that it was art from your family, I'm like, that's even more meaningful. I just love it so much.
I love it. I love it. There's a little barbed wire fence there, and I had to explain some of the elements. There's like a really cute windmill. There had been a water tank there, but they thought they were confused by the water tank. And I was like, okay, local people get it, but I get it. It's a book for
Yeah.
everybody. So buy
Yeah.
water tank.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, Sarah asked, what do the Japanese symbols mean on
Oh,
the
it means
cover?
the turtle house. It's
Oh,
the
okay.
turtle house.
That makes sense. I love
Yeah,
it.
I got a lot of options on it because just the way the handwriting works in Japan, there's like different variations on how frilly it can be and how it looks. And so that was kind of cool. I got to choose and
How wonderful.
it was neat.
And I am curious before we wrap up in a few minutes, I would love to know two things. First of
Okay.
all, you mentioned that you're working on something coming up. Are you able to
Yes.
share a little bit about what that might be?
Yes, I am working on another historical fiction piece. I'm revising it actually right now. I'm going to turn it back into my agent and we'll do another round of revisions and then we'll go out to Harper with it over the summer because Harper gets first look. We hope they buy it. I think they will. I didn't get a 2-book deal, it was a 1-book deal, so I had to renegotiate again.
Mm.
Um, and it is a story that is set during the Dust Bowl, another Texas story, this one far west Texas. About 30 miles south of Dalhart, Texas, which is about as far in the Texas Panhandle as you can get. And it's a story of a fictional town that is Seventh Day Adventist, which I don't know if anyone knows their different religions and such. But my other side of the family was Seventh Day when they were young, and or my grandmother was young. And so it is an offshoot of that church, and what's going on in the environment um, kind of replicates what they know from the Bible, and they feel like it's end times. And so it's just kind of a story of a woman who has to lead her people to safety. So it's biblical and it's West Texas and it's Dust Bowl
That
all in one big
sounds,
book.
yeah, that sounds fascinating and like something that I haven't read before. So I'm so
I'm
eager to pick that
excited.
up.
It's been a lot of fun and I've loved the characters and I've loved working with them, and it's been
Mm.
a huge blessing to do so while this one was being like created and this book was put together and getting ready for the world. I've had something to pour my anxious energies into.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And my last question is, what have you read recently and loved? I know it's always tough to put people on the spot.
That
And even as a book
no,
reviewer, I draw a blank sometimes, but
no, always draw a blank, but I am reading. Okay, so I had to don't have my reading glasses on me because I kind of stepped on them on
oh,
accident. Um,
oh no.
yeah,
Shoot.
yeah, not my smartest move today. Okay, where is it? Oh, I have a list because I have just been trying to keep up with what I've read. But I just finished out Hollow Out the Dark, and it's a novel that's coming out in June, and it's by James Wade, and it's about prohibition in East Texas, and it's just a really great kind of gritty story, kind of a gritty Western Bonnie and Clyde kind of feel to it. And
Oh,
I thought that was fabulous. He's a very good writer. His language is just so beautiful, it just kind of pops off the page. You look at this guy, he's like, some Texas cowboy looking guy, tattoos and a hat, and you don't expect the words to come out of his brain that come out of his brain onto the page. And it's beautiful. I'm also reading Parish by Latoya Watkins. It came out a couple of years ago, and her short story collection is Holler Child. Those were both fabulous. She's a great writer. I guess they're all Texas writers. And then Pete and Allison Maine. Has anyone read that?
mm-mm.
It came out, I want to say right after the pandemic. And I was just looking for something to read that was set somewhere else, doing something different. And it was enjoyable. I kind of wonder, I want to talk to that author about how the ending works for them, but alas, I don't know that person. So, but I think she shares the same editor as I do, so maybe I can get
Maybe you
some
got a
intel.
connection. There you
Yeah, get
go.
some intel there.
Great.
So
Thank you for the recommendations. I love that.
they're good. I mean, like there's so many good ones that I've done recently that it's kind of nice. But the one that I loved was Remarkably Bright Creatures. I
Yes.
hadn't read it, but I listened to it as I was driving on book
Mhm.
tour through Texas. I had so much fun. I was like, this is the best book tour drive ever. Because I've never been a big Audible person. Um, but now with so much time in the car, I'm like, okay, I see why everyone loves this so much. This is like you can get twice as many books read
Mhm.
in the same. I mean, like, what? Such a late bloomer. Like, why did I just figure this out? So
Welcome to the party. Welcome.
oh
It's
my
so good.
gosh. So yeah, if y'all post on my page like the books that y'all like listening to because I need something to keep me awake. I tried to listen to Just Kids that came out years ago and it's great, but it's just I was like I'm sleepy. I need something to keep me awake. I need great voices.
Yep.
I need some good character actors. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Great.
So
Well,
Amanda,
does anyone else have any Oh, Kristen, do you have another question?
well, I just wanted to make sure Amanda mentioned Audible, but want to make sure she knew about Libro FM.
Yes, that's the other one that I've been turning to. In my car, for some reason, it works with Audible better. I don't know. It's a Volkswagen thing, or maybe I just need to figure it out.
Yeah. I don't know. I like it because it's the same price, I think, and um supports independent bookstores.
Okay, that's good to know.
And you can choose the independent bookstore you want to support. So like if you have a local indie that you want to support, when you sign up for Libro FM and pay the monthly fee like you do
Uh-huh.
Audible, the part of that money goes to the independent bookstore you selected.
Ooh, that would be fun. And then I could change it every little bit, so
Yeah.
I could spread it around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be
And
fun.
I don't know, I know because I'm an educator, they have advanced educator listing copies. There's like 15 to choose from every month that are new. And other people have talked about advanced listing copies. So they must have another program for advanced. Kelly, do you know what it is on Libro?
Yeah. Yeah. We
Um,
don't get it's just like an influencer
Hmm.
program. We don't get as many as the educators. But I think like 15 still, maybe. I don't know, 10.
yeah, but
But
the educator ones are almost all like young adult, like children's books.
Hmm.
And
oh, okay.
there's a few adult ones, but you just need to be patient. Sorry, my dogs want me to throw the
It's
ball.
okay.
Oh.
Um, anyway, I just love it. I love that they have a indie option.
That's
Yeah.
lovely.
Good.
Thank
Well,
you.
okay, I am gonna try. Ivana is usually our like screenshot book person. So I'm gonna, unless somebody else knows how to do this, I'm gonna try my way that I Googled. If it doesn't work, I'm just gonna like screenshot with my phone and we'll call it a day.
And I can
But
screenshot here too. I
wait,
have it pulled up, so
would you mind? That would
I
be
don't
so
mind at
okay.
all. I did. And I'm
Okay.
just gonna grab our little cute squares all together
Yep.
and no chat. And I'm gonna count 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm gonna try one more time. Let me
Okay.
get rid of this one because there we go. All right. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Okay. I have 2 good ones. I'll send them your way.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. We had the best time, and thank you for sharing part of your family's story with the world and with us. Just that extra bit was so sweet. So thank you.
It's been so much fun and y'all are just so lovely and like yeah, just reach out on social media and say hi. Now that I've met
Yes,
you, I want to keep up. So,
we absolutely will. Thank you so much.
thank you. Y'all have a good night.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.
I'm gonna end the recording before I forget.